names. I'm a green, and this is my POS 435 final project. For my essay topic, I chose option number 1, which discusses the different political ambition goals between men and women in the electoral process and how that might affect public policy. So we talked about how there's this really immense disparity between men and women in political office, which is a problem because it's not a fair representation of the public, particularly the interests of women. And Fox talked about this. He says that a government dominated by male elected officials is biased against the election of women and accordingly does not fairly represent the public, particularly in big cities. Because we have a legislation that is predominantly male, and how can men fairly represent a population that's over 50% women? We need some women in there. However, despite the disproportion in the gender role of elected officials, there really isn't any evidence to support bias towards female candidates. And in fact, research shows that women tend to perform better than their male contenders. So then, if people are voting for women, why are there so few female public officials? Well, according to the Citizen Political Ambition Study panel, which was a survey conducted by Wallace and Fox to decipher the variation of political ambition among genders, they say that the reason for the underrepresentation of women in political office is that there's a lack of female candidates within the electoral process, which means that men are running, but women are not. So even the most successful and accomplished women aren't seeking positions of public office. And statistics show that regardless of age or what party they're affiliated with or what their profession is, women just aren't running. And in class we talked about a few different theories as to why this might be, and one of them was masculinized ethos, which just talks about how politics is still very much a male-oriented institution, traditional views on potential candidates and electability, which usually favor the male contender. And then we talked about gendered psyche, which is a more deeply rooted perspective, suggesting that society and media instill the concept that politics is a suitable career for men, but really prevents women from even considering it as an occupation. And then finally we talked about traditional family role orientation, which places the emphasis on working mothers and the difficulty in balancing family and working lives, and sort of the stigma placed on the women attempting to do that. And I think that all of these arguments are contributors to the gender gap, but I feel like traditional family role orientation is probably the most significant. Politics is a full-time job and requires a lot of attention and focus, which is a big challenge for working mothers. 81% of women in the United States are mothers by the time they're in their 40s, which is around the time that someone might run for office. So really that depletes a lot of qualified, credential female candidates. I think that a lot of times just the idea of raising kids and working a full-time job and running a household and running for office is a bit too much to consider. It's a lot to juggle. So Anne-Marie Slaughter talked about this. She had experience in this department, and she said that I still strongly believe that women can have it all and men can too, and I believe that we can have it all at the same time, but not today and not with the way America's economy and society are constructed. I think that's true. I think that girls are raised to believe that if they don't professionally peak by the time that they're in their 40s, that they never will. And I think this leads to the delusion that we have to accomplish every personal and career-oriented goal that we have as quickly as possible and all at the same time. And that makes it really difficult to excel in both categories, to have a family and to do really well in your career also. I think that by the time women feel like they're in a suitable position to really run for public office, they're in their late 50s and 60s, and at that point, society views them as kind of declining and unstable, and this is a stigma that's directed exclusively at women because as men age, they're considered wise and experienced. It's just really not the same sort of discrimination. So I think it's important that society kind of changes the way that it perceives the role of women in the workforce and adjusts its expectations for working mothers. And I think in order to really, focus on getting women into public office, we have to do that first. So then we kind of talk about how women have an effect on public policy. Women are huge advocates for communal issues like education and committee work, and women's issues, obviously. And women have the ability to kind of conceptualize and assess situations differently than men would. So they bring different ideas to the table. They bring a lot of diversity in legislation advancement, and they bring a lot of topic variety. And so, women define women's issues more broadly than men, and they put them at the top of their legislative agendas. And so there's a lot more bills dealing with children, education, healthcare, all become legislative priorities when women are in office. Studies also demonstrate that an increase in female legislators prompts a prioritization in issues like poverty. So there's actually a decrease in poverty when women are in office. They prioritize social policy spending, and there's actually, when women are in office, women who are represented by women are more politically involved. They're more politically empowered and more educated on the issues that are happening. So then, how do we get women to run? Well, I think that, our country's democratic legitimacy kind of depends on the gender equality of our political institutions. So overcoming these barriers that we face through societal and political changes is a really big stepping stone. And I think that, like we talked about before, really reevaluating how we view women and women's role in society, and kind of educating our young women about politics and getting them involved at an early age. I think that's very important. And also, I think that as a lot of other countries have implemented, we could implement, policies like proportional representation, party established quotas, system-wide quotas, and things like that. These systems exist in many nations, and they provide an equal access to power structures, leadership, and decision-making, and they increase the participation of female representatives and result in additional and really varied policies and ideas. So I think that that's important, and that's a great way to kind of ensure that there's variance in our legislators and in our legislature.